Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from our previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. Good news, everyone! It's time for a brand new series review retrospective thing. With the new season dropping on Hulu, I thought it best to take a look at one of the most foundational adult animated series of all time, Futurama. A show that was canceled, came back, concluded, and came back yet again. It's the intergalactic epic that refuses to stay down. So what made this series so iconic and paved the way for a new kind of adult animated series? Short answer, passion, and lots of it. But if you're looking for a much more long-winded answer, hey, you've come to the right place. It's gonna be fun on a bun here in Season 1. Obviously, I can't talk about Futurama without first talking about The Simpsons. To say The Simpsons was a cultural phenomenon is the understatement of really the millennium. And in the mid-90s, it was at one of the highest peaks of its entire viewership to date. Do the Bartman was a chart-topping hit. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was a guest star on an episode you can never find anymore, and the show went from being just a Tracy Ullman sketch to a full-blown household media icon. The Matt Groening fire was burning very, very bright. So, when the creator of one of the biggest animated sensations ever tried to pitch a new show to Fox, they fought him on basically everything, which is very, very on brand for the channel. Even if you're one of the people that helped create one of the most lucrative IPs of all time, you were still going to fight an uphill battle to get a show made. That in and of itself would also be one of the most influential series of all time. So yeah, Matt Groening and David Cohen, who had a healthy background in computer science and mathematics and writing Beavis and Butthead episodes, got together to create the sci-fi comedy you know and love. A series crafted with so much heart and attention to detail it would maintain its cultural relevance for almost 30 years at this point. A series that still runs in syndication to this day. You can always find an episode of Futurama somewhere, and it's easy to see why. Simple character designs, much like The Simpsons, makes the characters easy to remember and inherently familiar. If I ask you to describe Fry or Zoidberg after seeing them once, you can probably remember every detail of their character pretty effortlessly. They're made to be memorable, and not just from a design standpoint either. The show is a celebration of all things nerd culture well before it was as mainstream as it is today. It's a series that references old movies like The Howling and celebrates Gary Gygax in Deep Blue, the chess computer, all in the infancy of modern internet. Fringe communities were finding a voice in a show made by the creator of one of the biggest shows of all time. A show developed from the passion of Groening and Cohen for their love of sci-fi and B-movie culture and little media hints that trust the viewer right from the pilot to get on the ride. Segway! It's a pilot, except not quite. This is probably the most important pilot of any series, but we'll get into it. We are introduced to Fry, a pizza delivery boy in the modern day 1999. And it's New Year's Eve! He's got to deliver a pizza to an icy wiener at the cryo lab. His girlfriend dumped him, he's got no aspirations, nothing to really look forward to, so yeah. The modern day has done nothing for him. Now, if you know the series, you know what I'm going to talk about. But this right here is one of the most important screenshots of all time. Right from the pilot, they're trusting the viewer. They're leaving a piece of a puzzle you don't even know exists yet. I know that sounds dumb, but think about it. How many other shows can you think of that have series-spanning ideas actually evidenced in the pilot itself? It's absolutely masterful and deserves to be celebrated. It's 1999. There were other adult animations at the time, like King of the Hill, Family Guy, and series before it like The Critic, but none really did an experimental thing like this. Futurama really did tread unknown territory, and it's all set up in one episode. Fry gets frozen and sent 1,000 years into the future, coming out in the world of tomorrow, aka 2999. It's New Year's Eve in the future, you see. It's something of a ticking clock. And yeah, Fry is welcomed to the future by one of the scientists, and we get our first appearance of Leela, a one-eyed alien who helps people get their jobs assigned and will hunt them down to comply. The computer says that Fry is assigned to be a delivery boy and he decides to buck fate and cheese it. While running after him, Leela ends up in a cryopod set for 1,000 years in the future, and even though he didn't have to, Fry ends up going back and turning the dial to 5 minutes before running away. It may not seem big, but it's a great display of who Fry is. He's in a completely unknown world, almost getting chipped and having an alien chase him down. What does he do? He goes to make sure they don't go through what he did. No one is saying Fry is smart, but deep down, he does have a heart. He does genuinely care about people. And it's those moments that make Fry such an interesting character. He's not a dopey dad or a Beavis and Butthead class idiot. He's just some guy named Philip J. Fry. So yeah, it's Fry running around New York looking for his only living relative, Professor Farnsworth. He meets a robot named Bender in a Hee-Hoo booth, and they start to become friends when he convinces Bender that he doesn't need to take himself out, and that he's his only friend in the world. You can say whatever you want about Bender, but in my heart of hearts, I genuinely believe he and Fry are best friends. He'll do a lot of messed up stuff, but the writers are very clever about how they build this a boy and his robot brotherhood up. Bender takes Fry to the Head Museum and they meet Leonard Nimoy's head, played by Leonard Nimoy in his first appearance on the show. Leonard Nimoy, acclaimed monorail stopper and I guess Star Trek star, sure. Dick Clark would also guest star. Oh, and we get the first appearance of Richard Nixon's head. Now, one of the main reasons for why this show was such a success was its voice cast. I know, I waited this long to talk about it, but I think it's best to talk about it here. See, when Fry gets Bender to bend some bars and they make their way to Old New York, the two are caught by Leela, who takes out her chip and explains how she knows how it feels to be alone. And our trio has been formed. Fry would be played by Billy West, who you will hear as basically every third character throughout the show. Bender is played by John DiMaggio, who was relatively unknown at the time, and Leela would be played by Katie Sagal, hot off of playing Peggy Bundy in Married with Children, one of Fox's most watched sitcoms that had just finished running for 11 seasons. She was arguably the biggest star power of the show at the time, and has gone on to have an incredible career. Billy West had done cartoon work up to that point, was even Bugs Bunny in Space Jam, Stimpy in Ren and Stimpy, among a ton of other characters in the show, and Doug in, Doug. Both he and John DiMaggio would go on to have massive voice acting careers that impacted both my and I'm sure your childhoods. We'll get into the rest of the cast in the next episode, but the core three is full of just absolute talent. Like, Katie Sagal really put a lot of care into Leela, and you can tell. This was not a paycheck for her. She was having a lot of fun. And so, the three make it to Professor Farnsworth and they use the Planet Express ship to escape the police, come back, and Fry gets to travel the stars as an intergalactic delivery boy. As a standalone pilot, it actually works really, really well. It's a contained episode that is basically just a sci-fi Twilight Zone-esque comedy. Delivery boy gets sent to the future and ends up a futuristic delivery boy. And yet, it also sets up all the pieces to tell a bigger story if they wanted to. It's a perfect balance that made the series stand out compared to the other shows of the time. Space Pilot 3000 is a futuristic 8 out of 10. And here we are in the series proper, and we get an introduction to the rest of the Planet Express crew. Amy Wong would be played by Lauren Tom, who was also playing Connie and Min on King of the Hill at the time. Hermes Conrad would be played by legendary voice actor Phil Lamar, and everyone's favorite comedian, Dr. Zoidberg, would be played by Billy West, who also plays Professor Farnsworth. That's 3 characters in the main cast alone, on top of Richard Nixon and Smitty the Cop in the last episode. Like I said, the voice cast carries the show, and it really relies on about 10 actors. On top of the Planet Express crew, we'd get Maurice LaMarche in all kinds of roles, Tress MacNeille, David Herman, Tom Kenny right around when he was starting to play a talking sponge, and even Simpsons veterans Dan Castellaneta and Kath Soucie, aka Dexter's mom in Dexter's Lab, and like 1,000 other voices she's done. It's really kind of amazing to see so many big-name voice actors collected in one show, showing off all of their incredible ranges. Like at the core of the episode, the crew go to the moon and wacky hijinks ensue. Amy loses the keys, Bender gets kicked out for trying to get the keys out of a claw machine, and Fry and Leela go on a moon rover that Fry takes off the track so he can see the moon he'd always dreamed of instead of the Disneyland-esque crater of fun it had turned into. It's simple, but it's actually a really great Fry story. Imagine going 1,000 years into the future and what took years of innovation just to stand on the moon for a few minutes has become as trivial as going to the boardwalk. It shows how out of time he feels, and you genuinely feel for him. Also, something I wanted to celebrate in the series was the early use of CGI. The show began development in 1997. To give some context, Toy Story came out in 1995. Conventional CGI as we know it was still very much in its infancy, and yet the creative team behind Futurama actually did a really brilliant job with blending 2D and 3D animation for the time period. They essentially did this by wrapping all the CG models in the pop futuristic skin of the show. It's able to hide the flaws that show up when you're trying to make your content look a little too realistic, like say, Godzilla 98 that came out a year before, which, funnily enough, would also have a ton of Simpsons voice actors in it, including Hank Azaria, who would guest star in this show. It's all connected. Consume media. The Planet Express ship isn't trying to look realistic. The models are again super simple, so it makes it easier to do simple CG animations with them. And the CG has been done in a way that it's actually aged incredibly well after 2.5 decades. Bender sleeps with a space farmer's crushinator, Fry and Leela hide in the Moonlander to stay warm, and Amy's claw skill game save the day as they save the gang and fly off, and we learn about Bender's secret dreams of folk singing. The series has landed is a moonstruck 8 out of 10 that shows that the jokes are still feeling fresh after 25 years, and they're not afraid to throw in small references that you may not have noticed on first watch through. How many shows seriously reference a trip to the moon? Much less in 1999. I don't know. The show was very smart for its time. So, how I was talking about a trip to the moon in the last episode? You need to understand how important a trip to the moon is. A Trip to the Moon is hailed as one of the first sci-fi movies ever made. It's a silent movie made in France where they go to the moon. And that's the level of references you're going to get with this series. Even if you look at the episode title, I Roommate, you're probably thinking, like the Will Smith movie. But no. That movie wouldn't be made for another 5 years. No, the episode title is a reference to the Isaac Asimov collection of short stories, which again, you can just look that up on IMDb. Except no, you really couldn't. Conventional ideas of the internet were still years away, and even I remember still using dial-up internet in the 2000s. Access to information was way less instantaneous back then than it is today. And Futurama is a beautiful showcase of all the nerd culture that they'd consumed and appreciated throughout the years being blended into a comedy. I don't know, these aren't references you'd make to get widespread appeal. However, the jokes attached to those references were funny enough that people just kept going along for the ride, even if they didn't get the actual deeper context to those jokes. Much like the Venture Brothers, the more you learn, the more you enjoy the series. I say all this because, the episode is Fry and Bender shopping for apartments. That's it. Bender has an apartment, but it's the size of a closet, and Fry can't live there with him. They find a new apartment, but Bender would have to cut his antenna off, otherwise he'd disrupt the satellite feed of the hit robot soap opera, All My Circuits, that everyone is obsessed with. Which, I'll admit, Maurice LaMarche is amazing as Calculon, and I'm gonna say that about a lot of the characters he does, because he's just that good. Oh, look at that, wouldn't you know it, Bender's apartment opens into a bigger living space that Fry can stay in. Conflict resolved. I'm gonna be real with you, gang. I watched this entire season in one sitting and did not laugh once. Now, that's not to say it wasn't funny. That's saying I've seen these episodes, the Fox era at least, over 20 times at this point. I've seen them on reruns on Adult Swim, or Comedy Central, or on Hulu, again and again and again. They're great viewing, and if you've never seen the show, you'll probably get a kick out of the less dated references. It's just, when you've seen them so much, it takes a higher bar for them to get you. And I'll admit, there are episodes in the Fox era that still got a laugh out of me. This season just didn't do that, and that's fine. I Roommate is also just a perfect example of building new things to reference, like All My Circuits, while still being just a fun, standalone, contained adventure. I Roommate is a lease renewing 8 out of 10. Now, I've seen a lot of episodes, and I love a lot of Futurama. I really, truly do, and I know I said last time that, hey, these episodes are good, these episodes are quality. This is the one episode I usually skip more than any other. Leela is feeling lonely after another failed date and feeling the crushing reality of seemingly being the only one of her kind on Earth. Professor Farnsworth sends her and the team on a trip to a collapsing planet that had all of its dark matter mined out, and Leela is determined to save the animals and make things right. However, the planet is under the watchful guard of one of Dupe's mightiest space captains, Captain Zap Brannigan. Oh, and Kiff, his much more competent lieutenant, played again, brilliantly, by Maurice LaMarche. Get used to hearing that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Zap Brannigan was initially designed to be played by legendary comedy actor Phil Hartman, but he would tragically pass much before his time, and before he could ever don the old red and gold. I'll always wonder what could have been, though Billy West does do an outstanding job of making Brannigan feel like his own unique brand of idiot. Well, Leela sleeps with Zap to get a chance at going to the planet. Turns out Zap is pretty incompetent and absolutely just the lamest man imaginable, and sours the very idea of romance for Leela. They go and get the animals off the planet, but when they try and leave as the planet starts to collapse, they run out of fuel. Leela had saved a little three-eyed creature thing and it ate all the other animals. Squat out some dark matter and bingo bango bongo, Leela has her pet Nibbler now. It's our first Leela episode, and it's great that she gets enough of the focus that you can understand why she's so eager to find someone to be with, to just have a connection with. She's all alone, and she's been all alone since she was a kid. She doesn't have anyone like her, and she just wants to find a place where she belongs, even in a galaxy where there's a gelatinous goo monster that regularly shows up, and even he found love. She also genuinely cares about animals and is much smarter than Fry and Bender, and that's beautifully been established. As far as establishment episodes go, this one was absolutely necessary to set our core three up. That being said, I actually think it's one of the worst Zap Brannigan and Kiff episodes. Obviously, it's their introduction and you have to set up a lot pretty quickly, but I don't know. There's a spark missing to Brannigan that will shine way more brilliantly in the next season. Love's Labor's Lost in Space is a Danger Will Robinson 7 out of 10. It's our first appearance of the futuristic sport that's sweeping the galaxies, Balloons Ball! Bender talks about some of the greatest Robot League players of all time, and when everyone judges the robots for literally being built to play Blurns Ball and nothing else, Bender understandably gets upset. This is further added to when he tries to not go on a job because it's the robot holiday, Robonica, which he absolutely made up, but alas, he, Fry, and Leela are off to a planet run entirely by human-hating robots. And since the robots actively hate humans, Bender is the one that has to do the delivery. Bender is sent down to deliver the package, but when it sounds like he's been captured, Fry and Leela go down to try and save their friend. They have to integrate into bot society, and when they find out that Bender is alive, they end up getting caught and sentenced to be hunted. We find out that the robot elders created the anti-human rhetoric as a way of giving the robots a shared enemy to hate, and Bender sees that his friends really do care about him at the end of the day. Bender is a very interesting character in the early seasons. He had these ambitions and this passion you wouldn't expect from a robot, which is inherently the joke. He wants to be a folk singer, he has a passion for cooking, and he has this sense of robot pride while also seeing himself as better than everyone else. And he regularly commits crimes. He's got a lot of angles. Say what you will about the show, but the characters are incredibly multi-layered, and while the setup for the episode is arguably dumb, it makes sense for Bender and why he'd feel how he feels. And those ideas are carried throughout the show. He wants to be liked, he wants to be rich and powerful, he enjoys doing crime, and he has insecurities about what he wants to do in his life, and has best friends he holds near and dear. Fear of a Bot Planet is also very much a celebration of the retrofuturism of the show. Something that makes Futurama so evergreen is its looking to the future while having designs that even at the series' inception were rooted in the 1960s retro future, much akin to the retrofuturism idea in, say, Fallout. The robots are never really done in like a 90s sci-fi style. They don't look like Terminators. They're not Robocops. They're much closer to the robots of the Jetsons or old science weeklies. They're big and clunky and most look like you could fit a person in them and work them like a suit. It adds a charm to the robots that they're just these simple yet effective designs. I don't know. It takes a skill to create a bot planet and have it be both incredibly uniform and unique at the same time. There's a hint of creativity and personality to the robots that sets them apart from other robots of the time. The episode is probably one of the best episodes of the first season and is easily one of the strongest of the show. Fear of a Bot Planet is a human-averse 9 out of 10. Companies market to you in your dreams, and that's too dystopic 5 me. When Fry and the gang go shopping, he finds out he's broke and goes to check his old bank account and finds out his 97 cents turned into like $4 billion over 1,000 years. Now, ignoring the several world-cleansing wars that we saw in the pilot, sure, yeah, why not? Fry has a ton of money, what could possibly go wrong? He starts blowing it on novelties of the old world and gets his own apartment where he goes on a massive spending spree at an auction, and we're introduced to Mom of Mom's Robots and her 3 sons. She gets into a bidding war with Fry over a can of the now extinct anchovies. She wants the anchovies as a permanent lube for her robots. Fry wants them to put on a pizza. Only the greatest minds clash this day. And when she loses the auction, Mom is determined to destroy Fry and all that he holds sacred, sending her sons to take his money from him. First and foremost, Tress MacNeille does an amazing job of making Mom this multi-layered antagonist. She can maintain this loving, doting public persona while actually being an incredibly crafty corporate overlord. She got to the top through shrewd business decisions and feels like a fantastic Orwellian threat that ultimately you just kinda have to live with. She's also reinforced by the fact her sons are a whole choice. I've never been a huge fan of them, but I get their purpose. They're basically just the Three Stooges, just slightly competent, which I'm sure that alone will upset the 2 Three Stooges fans watching this. Anyway, they kidnap Fry and make him think he's back in the past at his old pizza joint where modern-day celebrity Pamela Anderson, played by Pamela Anderson, shows up. Yay! They get his pin, drain his account, and he shares the anchovies with his friends. Like, I know it's a super condensed version of the episode, but if you're watching this video, you more than likely already know all these episodes and just want to hear my opinions and judge them. And honestly, A Fishful of Dollars is another solid episode, largely because Fry never feels irredeemable. You're given over $1 billion overnight. Of course that is going to go to your head, and he is willing to spend a fortune to feel at home. You can write a lot of Fry's ignorance off as just being a man in a foreign land. He's 1,000 years in the future. He's going through it. He just wants some form of comfort and is willing to spend any price to get a bit of familiarity back. And yet, in the end, does he sell the anchovies to get some of his money back? No. He shares them with his friends. Not to torture them, even though they don't like them, but shares something he loves with his new family. It shows Fry's priorities and why he wants to take care of those around him. He lost his old family, he doesn't want to lose this one. He's a dumb guy, but he's not an inherently bad guy, and that's a very important distinction. A Fishful of Dollars is an extra oily 9 out of 10. I'll admit, my family loved this episode for one reason and one reason only. Elzar. We find out Bender loves to cook thanks to his love of Elzar's cooking show, which is a reference to the cooking shows of Emeril Lagasse in the 90s during the early years of Food Network, one of the most influential cable channels ever made. You wouldn't hate Guy Fieri donkey sauce without it. Emeril was such a big name, NBC even tried to give him a sitcom that had one of the most unfortunate air dates since The Amazing Race. Lasted like 10 episodes. Elzar, however, would become an institution and is a great and wonderful character for John DiMaggio to do. Again, remember, this is relatively early in a lot of these people's careers. This was showing what these actors could do, and they genuinely cared about the characters they were bringing to life. Elzar and Bender, if you listen, you can tell are both DiMaggio, but their delivery is just different enough they feel unique. Anyway, Bender is cooking for the crew, and obviously a robot has no sense of taste, so it's all atrocious. Leela calls Fry an idiot because he is an idiot and almost gets his organs harvested, and so after a high-sodium meal, he goes out onto a desert planet to deliver a letter and show Leela he's not a complete moron, and proceeds to unknowingly drink the emperor of the planet, becoming the next to rule a short-lived monarchy. The crew come to save him, and honestly, this is an away mission with everyone, and the episode perfectly showcases the dynamics at play. Unlike most animated sitcoms that are family-focused, like Flintstones, The Simpsons, or Family Guy, Futurama is much more akin to a workplace sitcom like Taxi or Cheers. Archer, Inside Job, and even arguably South Park would follow that same kind of formula. These people are a work family and they're doing everything together, and it opens them up to new dynamics you wouldn't be able to explore from a family perspective. Like when finding out that Fry will be taken out to be replaced by the next emperor, they try to get him to cry the emperor out, and you see he genuinely cares about Leela and doesn't want her to get hurt, which is juxtaposed with Leela being capable enough that she can fight an entire Hydra-powered army by herself, which I will say I love that they never take Leela's autonomy away to make her the damsel in distress. More often than not, it's Fry or Bender that needs saving. There are some parts where the episode does drag here and there, but overall, I appreciate that by and far, these are dedicated adventures. There's very rarely a B story this season, and if there is, it still blends perfectly back into the main story. So, My Three Sons is a high sodium 8 out of 10. Professor Farnsworth is struggling to come up with an invention to show at the Inventors Conference, and we see his former student turned rival, Dr. Wernstrom, who I will say, I've been critical of Dave Herman in the past, but I think he does an absolute blowout job as Wernstrom. I don't know, you can just hear his energy in every role he does for Futurama. Now, granted, this is 25 years ago, so he's going to sound different from, say, Paradise PD, but it just goes to show no one's in the show just because. They are actively trying to make this evolve. Even Ron Popeil is trying, and he was just the king of the infomercial. Farnsworth fumbles and tries to pitch a smelloscope that does not go over well, and he gets laughed out of the room. Turns out he'd already built the smelloscope, and while Fry is just sniffing past your rectum, he finds an absolutely vile odor coming from beyond the stars. A garbage ball that had been launched into space as a way to get rid of New York's trash problem. So how does the future save itself from the past? They listen to Fry and learn how to make some trash. They send a second trash ball to take out the first one, the day is saved, and there's a new problem for the people of the year 4000. Honestly, I think A Big Piece of Garbage is the best episode of the season, and a perfect example of what the show is if you're showing a first-time watcher. It feels like a parody of an old Star Trek The Original Series episode, while also having a unique angle all its own. Futurama isn't a joke series with a sci-fi skin, it's sci-fi through and through, and having Fry be the hero of this story is terrific. His old ways of thinking saved the future, and while he's still dumb, it shows that he has an importance to him. The episode is some of the best jokes of the season and is a great showcase of the ideas they're working with. If this was the season finale, it'd be satisfying and really shines on the potential of what Futurama could be. Which, if you know what's coming, you know it lives up to that potential and so much more. A Big Piece of Garbage is a freshly Febrezed 10 out of 10. Last episode, Fry saves the future with the power of garbage. This episode, Bender gets addicted to electricity. The gang goes to a Beastie Boys concert, and Bender reconnects with an old friend who gets him hooked on the devil's dopamine. That's shockingly good stuff. After consuming some of that blue lightning and driving the ship into a cosmic storm to help keep his static buzz going, Bender finds salvation in the good word of robotology and converts religions, starting to be as pious as possible. The crew are determined to get him back to his old ways because he's insufferable like this, so they take him out to Atlantic City, the home of Vice, on a budget. Sure enough, Bender slips up, and when he does, he's taken by the robot devil to robot hell. Robots have constructed a realistic version of hell to keep themselves honest, and I kinda love the absolute literalness of it. The robot devil would also be played by Dan Castellaneta, who is famously everyone's favorite duff-drinking superdad, Homer Simpson. Leela and Fry go to break Bender out and end up getting into a golden fiddle contest, and hey, look at that! Bender's flying his way out of hell like he's Dante with a dream. Hell as Other Robots has a lot of really interesting angles, though you can definitely hear that Phil LaMarr is still figuring out how he wants to play some of these characters in the episode. He's still great, don't get me wrong, but his performances in this episode and even this season is just completely overshadowed by what we get next season, so it does stand out a little bit more. The episode isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's just not an episode I would say beats a big piece of garbage. It's a great episode to walk away from the show at if it doesn't get a second season, but overall it's just okay. Nothing was set up and left unresolved that needed to be addressed, and it's just a perfectly solid standard adventure to wrap a season. Hell is Other Robots is a Born Again 8 out of 10. And there we have it, that's season 1! Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Overall, season 1 is a fantastic display of what viewers can expect without setting up anything that needs an immediate resolution. There are no cliffhangers, and each episode can absolutely be watched out of order and still give you a fun little sci-fi adventure. Between great voice acting, smart writing, and references that trust the viewer, season 1 of Futurama showed that adult animation could be both what The Simpsons established as a new norm and something else entirely. Where Family Guy tried to warp The Simpsons setting into its own thing, Futurama does everything in its power to stand out as its own unique series, and shines because of it. Anyway, that's gonna do it for us here at the Lecture Hall, and if you like content like this, consider joining our Patreon or YouTube membership. $2 a month and you get early access to videos including, and this is why it took so long, Futurama Seasons 2, 3, and 4 available right now. You also get special polls and your name on this fancy list. Ooh! Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to stay strong, keep fighting that good fight, and know that I'll always believe in you. A new dawn is coming, I can feel it. And I'll see you all next time when there's much ado about Season 2. Goodbye, everybody.